Welcome back, everybody. Nick McVicar here, and I'm very happy to be joined by Bowen Assman to talk about the NC2A Men's March Madness Tournament. Bowen, how are you doing, man?
I'm really good. It was a great weekend of basketball watching men and women's, and it's just going to become even better this week. So I'm pumped.
Absolutely. And the games on both sides have been phenomenal. We're talking to Haley later this week about the women's tournament, but we wanted to get you in, talk a little bit about the men's tournament. We're heading into the Sweet 16, but let's go back. We'll get to the Sweet 16 in a second. Let's look at the round of 64 and the round of 32. Some incredible games, incredible upsets to get to where we are. What really stood out from you this week?
Well, I mean, we could talk about, a bunch of the Cinderella stories like the Abilene Christian upsetting Texas. Um, but what I really liked to watch UCLA play basketball. And again, we see it with the first four team advantage to the Sweet 16. They beat a really tough Michigan State team in the first four. And then they went through BYU pretty good. And then they wiped the floor with Abilene Christian. And it's going to set up to be a tasty matchup in the Sweet 16 against Alabama. But I mean, what Mick Cronin has done with that program, they have the two guards, Jamie Jaquez and Johnny Juzang, just absolutely going off. To me, that was probably the most exciting matches I've seen, and just to watch them play. But we'd be remiss if we don't talk about Loyola Chicago. Loyola Chicago upsetting the number one seed Illinois, who many chose Illinois as their Final Four. Maybe I chose that one as well.
Oh,
Yep,
I did.
yep,
Don't worry.
yep. But we were getting whispers heading into the tournament that Loyola Chicago, like they're just not. It's not a Cinderella run. They're a good team, and maybe it was biased for not watching their conference that they're in, but I mean, they absolutely dominated Illinois from the jump. It was incredible to see. Porter Moser is watching that game. It just sounded like he's one of the best coach in college basketball. I think he's going to be recruited by a lot of other big schools that have coach openings, like in Indiana. But watching him and then watching, of course, everyone's favorite center, Cameron Krutwig, with the balding head and the mustache going to town down low. I mean, that was a fascinating team to watch, and they're scary. I mean, they could make another Final Four run, and this Final Four run is not going to be a Cinderella story because they're a legit program, and they're playing against an Oregon State team that is on a Cinderella run of their own. So, I mean, yeah, Loyola Chicago was just very, very impressive.
Yeah, you mentioned two teams that you don't often get those kind of rankings being favored in the games that they're going into. Like UCLA was technically the favorite going into their second round matchup against Abilene Christian because they're 14 and 11 both made it through. Now Loyola going into the round of 16 is the favorite against number 12 Oregon State. You don't get that very often with these higher ranked teams, but that's what we're seeing this year. And a lot of weird numbers have made it into the round of 16. Obviously, we have the number ones in Gonzaga, Baylor, and Michigan. You got a number two in Alabama, but then we have a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, an 11, a 12. And of course, the story right now is the number 15 team, Oral Roberts, making it all the way to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I mean, Oral Roberts has been good. A lot of people, like, I don't think it was as impressive as people were saying, just because that old game against Ohio State, they did get lucky. I mean, they had their two guards go off, and that ending to that game was kind of crazy. So, I mean, then you played against a Florida team who kind of underperformed all season, had some injuries, and lost their best player, Keontae Johnson, earlier in the season to a stroke. So, while it's impressive for Oral Roberts to get into the Sweet 16, and they've been carried on their back by Smith and Kevin O'Banner, I mean, they're going to run into Arkansas, and it's going to be the first team that they've played that I think will give them a lot more trouble. And of course, with this week off, that's going to be a really interesting thing because they're still in the same area. They're still sequestered in Indianapolis. So they're going to have a lot of time to think about who their next opponent was. And maybe Oral Roberts caught Ohio State sleeping because, oh, they're a 15 seed. And then, of course, you play basically the day after, and they played against Florida. And I don't think they had the time to kind of game plan around that. So, I mean, I think Arkansas will take that quite handily against Oral Roberts. But, I mean, the fact that it's a 15 seed in the Sweet 16. It hasn't happened since Florida Gulf Coast when their whole Dunk City back in I think 2016. But yeah, no, Oral Roberts. I mean, good for them, but I think their magic's gonna run out here pretty quick.
Another big topic, I guess, from the first two rounds was the fallout of Big Ten. 9 teams. It was very, very highly rated. I guess you could also say some of the other big conferences outside of the Pac-12, everyone sort of struggled. But the Big Ten in particular, 9 teams going in, 4 out of the top 5 seeds, technically, I believe, because Ohio State was 5th ranked, maybe 6th, depending on which seeding you were using. So 4 out of the top 6 seeds were from the Big Ten. And they're down to 2. Sorry, 1. They're down to 1.
Yeah,
they're down to 1 in Michigan.
Yeah.
It's what happened to the Big Ten?
I mean, I think you can look at it a lot of different ways. This has kind of been the buzz, the main story heading into the tournament, how people were sleeping on the Pac-12, the Big Ten is bad, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, it may sound like a cop-out, but a lot of it is matchup driven, right? When you look in your schedule and you get the bracket, it's randomized, right? And you don't really know, but some teams, despite their seed, could be matched up better. And I think that played a little bit of a part in it. And also the fact that maybe in the regular season, the Big Ten beat up on themselves a little bit more. And that maybe fatigue or something played an impact, because you have to remember this was quite an interesting year because of the COVID season. There were a lot of teams and a lot of programs deciding to place a lot more of just conference games instead of, typically you'd have a lot of other conference games and you get into your conference games, but there were numerous who decided to just do conference games. And maybe that impacted the Big Ten. They beat up on themselves. They're kind of, each team is used to each other. And then all of a sudden you head into, and you're playing a team that, you've never played before. And all it takes is one game, right? And that's part of why we love it. But I think we need to just cool the brakes a little bit, because Michigan's still in. They were the best team in the Big Ten throughout the year. So, I mean, I think they'll be fine. I mean, they're going to play against a tough Florida State team, but yeah, I think we should pump the brakes on that a little bit.
Listen, I'm a Big Ten man, so I got to bring up the Big Ten conversation, or else I wouldn't be doing them justice.
Yeah.
Now let's look forward. We are at the Sweet 16. There's some very juicy, very interesting matchups in all 4 of the regions. What kind of steps stands out to you?
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned earlier that UCLA I really like. So the UCLA Alabama game to me is going to be my number 1 must-watch game. I love Alabama's offense. I picked them to win the national championship. Their guard depth is great, and they have a modernized offense with Nate Oates, who's in his 2nd year from Buffalo. They're basically just doing what an NBA team was. Let's shoot threes and let's get it down into the paint. And it's been working because they have a lot of good shooters on the team. Yeah. And UCLA is kind of on this Cinderella-y run. They got the 2 guards who have been playing out of their mind. We can hope that can continue. So definitely there, that's going to be my must-watch game. And I think the winner of that will make it into the Final Four, because you're going to play against Michigan or Florida State. And I think those 2 teams will beat up on each other quite a bit. Florida State has the size, Michigan, obviously the favorite heading in. So that's probably my biggest one there. And then, I mean, we haven't talked about Syracuse yet. Buddy Boeheim, Coach Boeheim's son, absolutely going bonkers in this tournament. If you haven't watched any Buddy Boeheim, you need to. He's shooting up draft boards where he wasn't even a draft prospect. But, I mean, if he makes it to the Final Four, you guarantee that he's going to declare early and head into the draft as a 6'6", 6'7" guard who can shoot from anywhere. He's been unconscious. I can't wait to watch that against a Houston team who, frankly, have underperformed so far in this tournament. They're heading into the 2 seed. They beat up on Cleveland State team. That was expected. But the game against Rutgers had it in the bank, and Rutgers, frankly, blew it. I don't think it was from Houston's immense skill to win that game back. I think it was just Rutgers got a little scared, went into their prevent offense, and all of a sudden Houston's into the Sweet 16. But I think look at that as another potential upset choice. I'm definitely going to go with Syracuse over Houston. I'm going to ride that Buddy Boeheim train all the way to the station. That's for sure. And then who knows? Since Illinois got knocked out, I see Loyola Chicago advancing as well, and that could get into a tasty matchup of Loyola Chicago Syracuse, which I think would be fun to watch. And up in the top of the bracket here, I mean, Arkansas, Oral Roberts discussed about this a little bit earlier. I mean, Arkansas has been very good. They beat a really good Texas Tech team. Eric Musselman has coached very good for the squad. So I think Arkansas wins that one easily. Baylor Villanova. Baylor is the second best team in the tournament. I think they have been. Obviously, Gonzaga number one. So I think they get by Villanova. And Gonzaga, you just keep watching, and I mean, there's no, I'm never worried when I watch them. They could be down 10 with 10 minutes to go, and it's just like, oh yeah, they're just gonna win. They're
It's
undefeated.
fine.
So
It's fine.
yeah, undefeated so far this year. They have so many guys that can hit you from different angles, and Mark Few is just a mastermind on the court. So that's obviously going to continue rolling through. But another interesting game is the USC Oregon in the bottom half there.
Yeah.
Oregon obviously has only played one game because of the COVID thing with VCU, and they looked really good depth-wise over an Iowa team who didn't play much defense. But they're going to go up against USC, and this USC team has a projected top 5 NBA draft pick in Evan Mobley, who is, I think he's a 7-footer, and he can guard in space. He can knock down shots. He can go around the basket. So he's going to be really interesting because I think they're going to do a lot of pick and roll coverage trying to draw him out, and just to be able to see how he can stand up on the perimeter game is going to be fascinating. And if Oregon keeps shooting hot, I mean, I could definitely see them advancing again.
Yeah, who knows? If you get hot, that's such a big thing. The one thing I wanted to talk about, you mentioned the Syracuse Houston game, and Syracuse plays a very similar style, in my opinion, to what Rutgers and a lot of the Big Ten teams play. Right? They can shoot. They're a bit more physical. They're not gonna shy away from the physicality in the paint. Do you think that's going to play a huge factor in that Houston game? Because as you mentioned, they didn't look great against Rutgers, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny with Syracuse that, they're known for their patented 2-3 zone. Boeheim's, has made his mark off that. And it seems so simple, like you're taught growing up ways to attack the zones and ways to get easy buckets. But when you watch it play out, it seems like every tournament, these teams are flustered by it and don't know what to do. And I think that's going to play a big impact. Maybe the physicality as well, but I think that zone's going to be a big deal because there's not many other teams that play zone religiously, let alone a 2-3 zone. And the fact that Syracuse can attack you with that, with them size that they have, like Dolezaj, and then you have to worry about, like we said, Buddy Boeheim on the offensive end shooting threes. But at the same time, we haven't seen this consistency from Boeheim and his hot shooting, so he could go cold. And if he goes cold, we could watch a really ugly slug it out game, which Syracuse loves to do.
Yeah, Syracuse is born for those games, though.
Exactly.
So I don't know if Houston is, but Syracuse is definitely born for that kind of game. All right, Bowen. 8. We're gonna have 2 games for each region. We're going to get down to the Final Four by the end of this weekend. Who are your Final Four? Picking them right now before the Sweet 16. I got to hear who you got.
Well, I got to stay a little consistent to my bracket I did originally. Definitely Gonzaga. I think that one's a no-brainer. I mean, until they lose, I'm going to pick them. And I think it's fair for everyone just because of their dominance this year.
Good. I have that one right. All right.
I'm going to say Alabama. Like I said, I think Michigan and Florida State are going to beat up on each other a little bit. And I think Alabama's going to get past UCLA. So we'll do Alabama, Gonzaga in the 1/2.
Okay.
And then on the other side, I'm going to say Baylor. Okay. I think Baylor will play a good Arkansas team in the Elite Eight. And I think that'll be a very, very good matchup. But I think Baylor just has their guards have been so good and they've been such a consistent team. And I think tactically they'll be a little bit more sound. And they're going to go up against, let's do it. Let's do another run for Loyola Chicago. I mean, I was just so impressed with how they played. I think, like the play calling, their coaching is just on level. They have all their guys playing great. Canadian too, who's in their rotation.
Yep.
So yeah, let's go Loyola Chicago.
Wow. Hey, you're joining Irfan. He had Loyola Chicago making the Final Four from the beginning of the tournament, and we thought he was crazy. Clearly,
Well,
he saw something.
that was smart, but he also had LSU in the Final Four, so
Yeah.
I think it balances each other out a little bit.
It balances a little bit. But you know what? I'll give him credit for Loyola Chicago. He had a feeling that they were going to get out of the region. And by the looks of it, they have a pretty good chance now. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Very
Anything else you
favorable,
want to
yeah.
add in before we wrap this one up, Bowen?
No, I just want to say I'm happy that all the games are spaced out on Saturday, Sunday, so we can watch, spend our whole day watching basketball. Let's just hope for 4 more days of nonstop basketball action and some good quality ball.
Yeah. And don't forget, you can also catch in Canada, at least you can catch a lot of the women's tournament on TSN as well. So flip over because there's been some incredible games in that. We're going to get into that this weekend. So don't worry. We got you
TSN
covered.
all weekend. Yeah. TSN
all weekend.
Yeah.
Bowen, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. If you're looking for Bowen, you can find him on Twitter. If you want to give your handle there, buddy.
Yeah, it's at B0B0 Assman. Assman's the last name. So yeah.
Got to run with it.
Exactly.
Make sure you follow him. He's a great follow on anything basketball, NBA, college, you name it. He's got it. Also, incredible cycling insight from him as well. If you are a cycling person, follow Bowen. This guy is the best I've ever seen at cycling. So
yeah, anyone niche fans of cycling, hit me up. That's for sure.
But that'll do it for us here. We will be back this weekend with our full show with Kyle and Irfan. As I mentioned, we also are having Haley on, which is great. And we will bring you some more college basketball talk then. Thank you for listening. We will see you next time.